this episode, we're going to treat security awareness as a real safety system rather than a yearly ritual people forget the moment they close the browser tab. Most beginners hear awareness and imagine posters, quizzes, and generic reminders to be careful, but those rarely change outcomes because they don't change what people do when they are busy, stressed, or rushed. What we actually want is behavior change that holds up in the real working day, where messages arrive quickly, approvals pile up, and people make decisions with limited time and imperfect information. A strong awareness program is built around the idea that human behavior is predictable, and that predictable behavior can be guided with the right cues, habits, and supporting processes. When awareness is done well, it reduces real incidents like phishing successes, accidental data sharing, and risky shortcuts taken under deadline pressure. By the end, you should be able to explain what awareness is supposed to achieve, how to design it around behavior and not slogans, and why the best programs feel helpful rather than annoying. A useful starting point is defining what we mean by security awareness, because the word is often used as if it means simply knowing security facts. Knowing facts is not worthless, but awareness that only lives in someone's memory is fragile, especially when the moment of risk arrives unexpectedly. Security awareness is better understood as an ongoing program that shapes how people notice risky situations, how they decide what to do next, and how they recover quickly when something goes wrong. In other words, awareness is not information delivery, it is decision support. It aims to build habits like pausing before acting on urgent requests, verifying unusual changes, reporting suspicious messages, and handling sensitive data with care. It also aims to reduce the gap between what policies say and what daily work requires, because that gap is where shortcuts appear. Beginners sometimes assume a strong program turns everyone into a security expert, but the real goal is simpler and more practical. Help people make the safest, reasonable choice in the moment without needing advanced knowledge. When the design focuses on that goal, awareness becomes a control that reduces incidents rather than a box to check. From there, it helps to be honest about why awareness programs commonly fail, because those failure patterns are exactly what you want to avoid repeating. A common failure is treating awareness like a yearly event rather than a steady habit-building process, which leads to short-term compliance and long-term forgetting. Another failure is focusing on trivia instead of actions, like teaching definitions people will never use when deciding whether to click a link or approve a request. A third failure is using fear or shame, which may get attention temporarily, but often makes people hide mistakes and avoid reporting, which increases harm. A fourth failure is ignoring the environment, meaning the program tells people to do things that are unrealistic in the workflow, so people eventually dismiss the guidance as out of touch. Security awareness that changes behavior respects real constraints and then designs around them, rather than demanding perfect vigilance. This is why mature programs start with understanding the behaviors that lead to incidents in that specific organization, because different organizations have different risk patterns. When you design with those realities in mind, you stop educating for the sake of education and start educating for measurable outcomes. Behavior change begins with choosing the right target behaviors, and that choice should be driven by incident patterns, near misses, and common failure points. Instead of trying to teach everything, a strong program focuses on the handful of actions that prevent the largest amount of harm. These actions often include recognizing suspicious messages, verifying identity before sensitive actions, handling data carefully, and reporting quickly when something feels wrong. The key is to define behaviors in observable terms so you can tell whether they are happening. For example, verifying a request through an independent channel is an observable behavior, while being cautious is not. Reporting a suspicious message is observable, while being security-minded is not. A beginner misunderstanding is thinking the goal is to eliminate mistakes entirely, but the real goal is to reduce the frequency of high-impact mistakes and shorten the time to detection and recovery. When you select behaviors with that mindset, you make the program more achievable and more effective. You also create a clear bridge between training and incidents, because you can explain how a specific behavior interrupts a common attack or prevents a common error. That connection is what makes awareness feel relevant and worth attention. Once target behaviors are chosen, the next design challenge is making those behaviors easy to perform under pressure, because pressure is when failures happen. People do not fail because they hate security. They fail because the safe choice often feels slower, more awkward, or more uncertain. If verifying a request requires 10 steps or a long wait, people will skip it when they are trying to help a customer or meet a deadline. If reporting a suspicious message feels like it will create paperwork or embarrassment, people will delete it and move on. Awareness design should therefore include friction analysis, which is simply identifying where the safe action feels harder than the unsafe action. When you identify that friction, you can reduce it with simple supports, like clear reporting paths, simple verification guidance, and predictable escalation options. This is also where leadership tone matters, because people need to believe that slowing down for verification is valued, not punished. A program that teaches verification while rewarding speed above all else will fail, because behavior follows incentives. Designing for ease is not soft. It is practical engineering for human behavior. An effective awareness program also treats context as essential, because the same lesson delivered without context feels like noise. Context includes the role a person has, the systems they use, and the decisions they are expected to make. A finance role faces different risks than a customer support role, and a developer role faces different risks than an executive assistant role. If everyone receives identical training, much of it will feel irrelevant, and irrelevant training is forgotten quickly. This does not mean you need endless custom courses. It means you need targeted moments that reflect common scenarios and choices for each audience. For example, someone who approves payments needs strong habits around verifying changes, while someone who manages accounts needs strong habits around identity verification and access boundaries. When context is built in, learners can imagine themselves in the situation, which increases retention and confidence. Beginners should understand that awareness is more like coaching than lecturing, because coaching focuses on decisions in real situations. When the coaching fits the learner's role, the program earns attention rather than demanding it. Another key design principle is focusing on decision points instead of information dumps, because incidents often hinge on a small number of moments where a person chooses what to do next. In a phishing event, the decision point is whether to click, whether to enter credentials, and whether to report after noticing something odd. In a data handling situation, the decision point is whether to share a file widely, whether to include sensitive data in an email, and whether to store information in an approved location. In an access request, the decision point is whether to approve a privilege increase without verification. Awareness that changes behavior teaches people how to recognize those decision points and what default actions to take when uncertainty exists. The program should not expect people to analyze every detail. It should give them reliable defaults like pause, verify, and report. Those defaults are powerful because they are easy to remember and apply across many situations. A beginner misunderstanding is thinking you must recognize every trick to be safe, but recognizing the decision point and applying a safe default often matters more than recognizing the trick. When you train decision points, you train resilience, not just knowledge. It is also important to design awareness as a system that includes feedback and reinforcement, because behavior changes through repetition, not through a single exposure. People learn best when they encounter a concept, practice it, receive feedback, and then revisit it later in a slightly different form. If awareness is delivered once a year, it is like going to the gym once a year and expecting strength to last. Reinforcement can be light and frequent, such as short reminders tied to seasonal risks, quick refreshers after near misses, or simple prompts embedded in normal workflows. Feedback should be specific, meaning it tells people what was done well and what should be adjusted, without shaming. In many organizations, simulated tests are used to provide feedback, but the design matters, because tests that feel like traps create resentment and hiding behavior. The healthiest approach treats feedback as coaching that helps people build confidence in spotting and reporting. Beginners should understand that reinforcement is part of the control, because it keeps the right behaviors accessible in memory when needed. When reinforcement is well designed, it reduces incidents over time because safe choices become habitual rather than effortful. A program that changes behavior also depends on psychological safety, which means people feel safe reporting mistakes and suspicious events without fear of humiliation or punishment. This matters because early reporting is one of the most effective ways to reduce incident impact. Yet many people hesitate to report because they worry they will look foolish or get in trouble. If the culture punishes mistakes, people hide them, and hidden mistakes become larger incidents. Awareness design should include explicit messaging that reporting is valued, that speed matters, and that the goal is learning and containment, not blame. It should also include predictable responses from the organization so that reporting feels worthwhile. Because if people report and nothing happens, they learn that reporting is pointless. This is where process and awareness meet, because the reporting path must be simple and the response must be visible enough that people see the system working. Beginners sometimes assume culture is too soft to matter, but culture directly affects whether people act quickly when something feels wrong. When psychological safety is real, the organization becomes faster at detecting and stopping threats. Another part of designing awareness is aligning it with controls that support the desired behavior, because training cannot compensate for a broken environment. If people are taught to store sensitive data only in approved locations, those locations must be easy to use and reliable. If people are taught to use strong authentication, the authentication process must be usable enough that they do not look for workarounds. If people are taught to verify requests, there must be a clear verification channel that is socially acceptable and quick. This alignment prevents the common failure where awareness tells people to do something that the system design makes painful. When the environment supports the lesson, people experience success, and success reinforces behavior. When the environment fights the lesson, people experience frustration, and frustration reinforces avoidance. This is why security awareness should be designed in collaboration with the teams responsible for workflows and tools, because behavior is shaped by what the tools make easy. Beginners should take away that training is one layer, not the whole solution, and it is strongest when it is paired with good defaults and supportive processes. When awareness and controls reinforce each other, the organization becomes safer without demanding constant vigilance. Measurement is another design element that must be handled carefully because awareness should be measured in ways that reflect outcomes rather than only completion. Completion metrics, like whether people finished a module, are easy to track but weak as indicators of risk reduction. Outcome-oriented indicators might include reporting rates, time to report, reduction in repeated failure patterns, or changes in how often high-risk actions occur without verification. Measuring behavior is sensitive, so it should be done with respect and transparency, focusing on program improvement rather than individual punishment. A program should ask whether the behaviors are becoming easier and more common, and whether incidents are becoming less frequent or less severe. If measurements show problems, the response should be to adjust training and workflows, not to blame. Beginners should understand that measurement is part of design because it creates feedback loops that help the program improve. Without measurement, awareness becomes a story people tell themselves about being safer rather than a practice that demonstrates safety. When measurement is thoughtful, it helps leaders justify investment and refine the program based on what actually works. Designing awareness that reduces real incidents also requires focusing on the highest impact incident types, because different risks demand different behaviors. Phishing and impersonation often demand pause, verify, and report, while data handling errors demand careful sharing, clear classification cues, and secure storage habits. Credential problems often demand strong authentication habits and resistance to reuse, while device loss risks demand consistent lock and reporting habits. The program should not chase every headline. It should focus on the risks that align with the organization's work and the most common failure points. It should also address the misunderstanding that awareness is only for non-technical staff, because technical teams have their own human risk behaviors, like copying credentials into unsafe places or expanding permissions under pressure. Awareness for technical audiences should focus on the decisions they make that have large blast radius, such as how they handle access, secrets, and configuration changes. Beginners should see that awareness is not about who is smart. It is about what decisions people face and how those decisions can fail. When you design by risk category, you can keep the program coherent and relevant while still being targeted. Relevance is the fuel that keeps people engaged and willing to change habits. A mature awareness design also anticipates that people will sometimes make mistakes, and it includes training for recovery behaviors, not just prevention behaviors. Recovery behaviors include reporting quickly, preserving context, and asking for help rather than trying to hide or fix things alone. In many incidents, the difference between a small event and a large breach is how quickly someone raised their hand and how quickly the organization acted. Training should normalize that mistakes happen and that the responsible action is to report immediately. This reduces shame and speeds containment. Recovery training also helps people avoid compounding errors, such as forwarding suspicious messages to coworkers, reusing a compromised password, or deleting evidence that would help investigation. Beginners often assume security is about never failing, but safety systems are built around responding well when failure occurs. When awareness includes recovery, it becomes more humane and more effective because it aligns with reality. People are more willing to engage with training that treats them like partners rather than suspects. That partnership increases incident reporting and reduces time to detection, which directly reduces real-world harm. Another essential part of design is ensuring leadership and managers reinforce the desired behaviors, because what leaders reward becomes the real policy. If a manager praises speed and ridicules caution, people will learn that verification is unwanted, even if training says the opposite. If leaders respond positively when someone reports a suspicious event, people learn that reporting is valued. Awareness design should therefore include communication and expectations for leaders, not just for frontline staff. Leaders should be able to explain why certain behaviors matter, and they should model those behaviors themselves, such as verifying unusual requests and using secure methods consistently. This is not about perfection. It is about signaling priorities. Beginners should understand that culture is created through repeated signals, and managers send those signals constantly through what they praise, what they tolerate, and what they ignore. When leadership alignment is strong, awareness becomes part of how the organization operates, not an add-on. When leadership alignment is weak, awareness becomes a compliance exercise that people endure and then forget. Designing for leadership reinforcement makes the program durable. As we close, designing security awareness that changes behavior and reduces real incidents means treating awareness as a practical behavior system, not a one-time educational event. The first step is defining the goal as decision support and habit formation, then selecting target behaviors that directly interrupt common incident paths. The design must make safe behaviors easy under pressure by reducing friction, adding clear defaults, and providing supportive processes that align with the training. Context and role relevance matter because people remember what fits their work, and decision point training matters because incidents hinge on moments, not on trivia. Reinforcement, feedback, and psychological safety keep the program alive over time, while measurement and leadership alignment ensure it improves and stays credible. When these elements come together, awareness stops being a slogan and becomes a real control that changes how people act, shortens response times, and prevents the small human missteps that so often grow into major incidents.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit DailyCyber.News.